All right, let's talk about some terrain building, and something I think the easiest and where I got started was items like this. Dungeon tiles. It's just out of styrofoam, pieced together, cut through, painted, and we'll go step by step how this is done. But these are some where I started to make easy tiles for setting up a dungeon in my games. Okay, things you'll need for this is going to be a paint stick, your piece of styrofoam to work with, a Sharpie, and a soldering tool with a little bit of a sharp edge on it. All right, this is warming up and getting hot. I'm gonna move it out of the way so I don't burn myself. All right, I use this styrofoam. You can buy it at your local hobby shops. You can go to Lowe's and get that insulation styrofoam. This I just acquired from a store that usually unpacks a lot of stuff, and asked them, and they just happened at the time have a dumpster full of it. So I just got a whole bunch of free styrofoam to use, and it works great, and you don't have to pay for it. You know, it's recycling. So what I like to do is this comes out to be about an inch. It's a little bit bigger than an inch, but when you use the soldering iron, it sort of takes away a little of the space. And so if you actually mark it off to exactly an inch, it ends up being pretty small looking square. So I like to use this, and it works pretty good. So you just want to quickly mark it. Draw your tiles. Horrible noise. I'll fast forward through all this a little bit. You'll also need something to cut through. Just a simple cutting tool to cut right through. I'm not going to use the whole thing because I need some for the side wall I'm going to build. So just cut right through that. All right, there's that. Now for your side wall, if you want, which is like this, right here, all you got to do with that is get it however big you want it. And then with the wall, just sort of crisp it down with your hands. Chop it up however you want it. Round it up. And then if you want, like, maybe have like a hole coming down where it just sort of dug into, it makes a mess. So just be prepared for that. There we go. Maybe dig a little bit more here. Maybe dig a little bit here. Take a pinch off there. There we go. Have it come down. All right. And you know, you can work on the back side a little bit. Make it look different. All right. And there that is. All right, I'll clean up a mess and we'll get back to your bottom piece. Now with your wall piece, basically get your soldering iron and, you know, just draw you some lines. It's going to eat right through there. However big you want your bricks to be, or whatever kind of rock you want. If you don't want it to be straight lines, you can draw each individual rock and make it different, like more of a stone wall. And then just every other, separate it out. Be careful, it's hot. There There. 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 All right, so we got that done. And on this, you're doing the same thing, just following this. I'll speed this up. Okay, so, wow, that looks a little too perfect for a dungeon tile. So maybe I need to add some cracks or something. You know, you just, whatever you want to do. Maybe take a piece of it off. Maybe go through here. And there you go. That's my dog. Just like that. All right, for this portion, I put a little bit of plaster of Paris on it. Gives it a little bit of a sort of a texture, and it also adds weight to it. So just a little bit of plaster of Paris. So just get a little bit. I just get enough till I get to the consistency that I want. Use an old paintbrush. And this one's been used a lot. All right. Also, these are rocks, little tiny things. I've got them at they're $1 at the Dollar Tree, or maybe you can get them at your local dollar store or 99-cent store. They're used for fillers for plastic plants and vases to make, fill vases with different rocks or size rocks. I think that's the section they were in and what they're supposed to be used for. But now this will start to set up and dry in I think about 8 minutes. So you want to sort of be quick about what you're doing with it. With this styrofoam, it doesn't really, it won't absorb any water really. And this stuff just sort of floats on the top of it, unless it's pretty thick. You got to really paste it on. And that's what you want anyway. You want a texture. And that's what you're doing, is basically giving it a texture. There we go. That's a little more melted milkshake, sort of. Frosty looking. So basically just ply it on. I'm gonna hold it over the cup a little bit to just have it drain in there. But make a mess with it, no big deal. Get it in there. But it's gonna tremendously add some weight to it. It's a big difference after you take one that hasn't been painted that's the same size and hold it with, and in the other hand have one that's been painted with this plaster of Paris. And it adds a good bit of weight to it. So, and weight's good on the board table because it, sort of stays where it's supposed to be. Don't worry about stuff falling off. I mean, best thing about doing dungeon scenes at your first tries of doing stuff is if you mess up with it, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's a dungeon. Dungeons have holes and gaps and doesn't look good. So once you sort of get it on there, like I do, I just try to brush off the gaps of just a lot of excess and brush it into the gaps. All right, and then I just set it up to dry. All right, so same thing with this one. And I'll just speed this one along. All right, there you go. Just, get off maybe your excess. You don't want lines in it. Make sure you can still see your indentions for your tile or your dungeon tiles. And you can just sort of do that too to give it a different, so you can't see the brush strokes. All right, and as you can see, I made a mess here. So that's why I put my plastic cutting board down. But once you get that on, then here's where you take your rock, your little rocks. Just get how much ever you want. And however much texture you want to your tiles. Throw a little on that. There we go. Just spatter it. All right. And you know, you can add a little thick spot if you want. What doesn't stick, you just you just knock off after it dries. All right, there we go. So now I just gotta let this dry. And remember, you don't need black. If you can't find black, any color will do, because you're still gonna paint over this. So you're gonna paint over all that you just put on there. So it doesn't really matter your color you want. I just got black because it's easy, and then I can also use it after the fact that I painted if I want to. All right, once this dries, I'll come back and we'll start the paint job. All right, let's see. I think it's dry enough to shake this off. So just give it a little tap. There we go. And that's on there. Of course, if you rub it too much, it's going to come off. But we'll put a layer of paint on top of that, help it stick down. Okay, it's still a little wet for painting, but we got that off. That's off. So most of all that, what you see that's still on there, is going to stay on there. So it's going to give it a little bit of texture. Also, you can see how the plaster of Paris is sort of filled in, and it's actually giving it a little bit of a texture to it. So we'll let this a little bit more time to dry, and we'll get back to that. All right, so now we're going to put just a black base coat on it. I make it pretty runny, nice and thin, so it just gets in all the cracks and crevices. Just a cheap acrylic paint. I think I get this at Walmart. I think it's like $1.50 for that. So we're just going to take this and put a coat on it. All right, and when you have this plaster of Paris on here, it makes a coating on it like a little shield. But if you do squeeze it too hard, you will crack it. But you know, that's no big deal. Just makes it like cracks in a wall. Throw another coat of paint on it, seal it up. And this stuff will absorb this paint really quick. All right, we'll get the next one. All right, let's get this one. Same thing, hold it nice and lightly so you don't collapse. Plaster of Paris. Get into the cracks. All right. Let's get that. All right. So there's how that looks. It'll dry pretty quick. All right, we'll let this dry. We'll come back. All right. We have our pieces formed out of our styrofoam. We've coated it with plaster of Paris. We've added a little bit of the tiny rocks sprinkled on and for texture. We added our black base coat. And now all we got to do is paint it. So come back for my next video and I'll show you how I paint them and put them together. See you then.